Okay. Well, I'm going to skip ahead here because I have a few more questions for you in some of these other areas, but I want to skip ahead to a section that the judges mentioned a couple times, and that's this question of, you know, what would you obtain by conducting a manual recount of the VVPAT?
Well, when the VVPATs are looked at, you may, as I said, see discrepancies between the VVPAT and what was recorded by the MBBs. So the MBBs they record certain things in the former way that these things were used. You could actually print out all of the ballots from the MBBs and actually see each of the individual ballot images one at a time, and then you could actually count those manually. But that's been replaced by the VVPATs in California, so you won't actually do that. So what you see in the MBBs is just the totals. And with the VVPATs, you're seeing the individual ballots themselves, that the voters individually verified, and then also the totals as well. In other words, the end total. So you can actually manually go through each of the ballots themselves, seeing, you know, each ballot, you know, how the vote was cast. And also you might see if things were missing, like those undervotes that we know there were at least 124 undervotes. Whether those were really undervotes or whether they might be write-ins, we would be able to see that on the VVPAT. So that's one type of thing that you would see on them. You could also see problems with the VVPATs themselves, so I can get into that as well.
Okay, let me go back to a moment. Let's take it back for a moment to these undervotes, these 124 undervotes, okay? How would you, or how would anyone be aided by conducting a manual recount of the VVPAT as to determine what was going on with these 124 undervotes? Okay, well,
if the undervotes weren't really undervotes, but they were actually just, there was a number of votes that were cast, and then there were some number of write-in votes, which actually are only viewable via looking at the VVPATs, and were not available in the summary tallies that came out from the county or from the MBBs, you would be able to see that on the individual voter verified ballots. In other words, if someone actually intended to cast a write-in vote, let's say they were casting one for either candidate, instead of clicking on the name of the candidate, they instead clicked on write-in. And this is, from my understanding of this, and we've seen this to be true, for first-time voters, sometimes they think they're supposed to write in the name of the candidate, and that's sometimes why they might write in even if the name of the candidate is actually already there. So they click on write-in, and then they would go through the actions necessary in order to create and cast the write-in. Before they cast it, when they're about ready to cast it, then the VVPAT would be printed out, and you might see that write-in name there. Now, depending on how the system was set up, and different counties can set up these systems in different ways. Different states set them up different ways, and different counties set them up different ways. They're federally certified, but they could be set up in a different way. So in the way that they're set up, if that tally, the electronic tally, doesn't give the names of the people who were individually cast as write-in votes, the individual VVPATs would certainly show that, because the voter would know that they saw that write-in name there on the ballot that they were about to cast. It's intended to be
Wouldn't
there.
a write-in typically be for somebody other than one of the listed candidates?
No, actually, it happened in the Bush versus Gore race, where people actually, because it was a punch card system, it was done by hand, so they actually punched the thing, and then they also wrote, you know, Al Gore in. So some people think, you know, it's sort of like when you ask a person to sign your name and then write it in. So some people think erroneously that they're supposed to actually, you know, click for it and then also write it in. The machines actually disallow you doing both. So they wouldn't, that would register as an overvote. And in fact, in Bush versus Gore, there was a large number of overvotes that actually were the same name of the person that was checked off on the ballot.
Isn't it true, not to digress, but you cannot vote twice?
That is correct. With this type of system, with the e-slate, you can actually do the overvote. So someone might be looking at that and think that it says write in, so I will write in the name of the candidate that I'm intending to vote for. And that does
Then
happen.
click that right in,
Click write in, then go through the process of writing in the person's name.
overlooking the person's name on the ballot.
No, they actually think they're supposed to write it in. Just sort of like when you ask someone to sign their name and then print it below, they think that that's what they're supposed to do. We've seen that, actually, there's a high percentage of that in first-time voters. When somebody's voting for the first time, they think that that's what they're supposed to do to actually vote, unfortunately. But that is what they think. And in fact, the procedures that the Secretary of State's office gives, it says that is still an allowable vote for those candidates. So they actually accommodate for that because there are a significant number of people who actually do that in each election.
All right.